recently.
Prices at the pump are up, but I never pay full price for gas anymore. I just use the free Get Upside Gas app that pays you cash back for every gallon of gas you buy.
Wait a minute. Are you saying you actually get paid cash when you buy gas with the Get Upside app?
Yes, up to 25 cents a gallon cash back every time I buy gas.
And does that actually add up to anything?
Some months I make $200 to $300.
Wow, that's serious extra cash. I'm downloading the free Get Upside app now.
Download the free Get Upside app now in the App Store or Google Play to save up to 25 cents a gallon when you buy gas. Use promo code RACE for a 25 cents a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's up to 50 cents a gallon on your first fill-up. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or any gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code RACE for up to 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. That's code RACE.
And let's continue. Instead of let's go, let's continue. Welcome back to the Sports Cubicle. We're here for a second hour. I don't know why. I guess you guys like us a little bit too much. Thank you for joining us. And if you're wondering, this is not the family meeting. Where is the family meeting? They'll be back next week, guys. Don't worry about it. They were nice enough to let us fill in. The good folks at CPT were nice. WCPT were nice enough to let us fill in. And thank you for joining us on this Sunday night. Polly! It's the end of 2021 is over here, and I can't really think of too many good things come out of it other than the Sports Cubicle here. But you're over here talking about how it's a great year to be a Buck and a great year to live in Tampa.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Tampa was title town this year as they brought home two major championships, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Tampa Bay Lightning once again. It's kind of a similar story to 2020 as the Lightning and then the Rays making the World Series in the previous year. But in 2021, we saw the Bucks win in football, the Buccaneers, the Bucks win in basketball, the Milwaukee Bucks, Tampa Bay Lightning in hockey, the Atlanta Braves in baseball, New York City Football Club in MLS, and the Chicago Sky right here in town here for the WNBA. College sports-wise, you had the Baylor Bears winning in basketball, and Alabama Crimson Tide football once again winning a championship. Seems to be every calendar year. You can set your January to that.
Shocker.
Yeah. I mean, did any of those championships stand out to you guys once I mentioned all six of those or all eight of those off the bat?
I'll tell you the one that, and it's not necessarily a good thing, it just kind of shows where sports are right now, is Baylor's men's basketball. Mm-hmm. Like, that's going to be a hard trivia question for years down the road. And it has nothing to do with how good Baylor was, because Baylor was a good basketball team.
Absolutely.
It's just that I think for the most part in college sports, unless it's the SEC, people don't care anymore. And a lot of it in this
for basketball or
for basketball, and I think, and I'll tell you what,
Big Ten is bigger than SEC for basketball.
Oh, for sure, but I'm talking SEC matters in college football.
Yes,
like that matters no matter what,
and that's pro, and that's given. That's automatic. That's why we're seeing no one's upset about Alabama, Georgia for the third straight time this year.
Exactly. Yeah. And the reason I say that about college basketball is it's going to have its fans. March Madness is what it is. Like, I love it. We're all suckers for the bracket. What I mean by it is we also understand that college basketball doesn't have the same fervor and it doesn't have the same emotional stance that a college football does nationally, in a big picture. You talk to a DePaul fan, a U of I fan, a Duke fan individually, the season matters, the team matters, but these kids aren't staying for school anymore. These guys are going to get paid. They're going to go to, D2 schools. They're going to go to HBCU schools. They're going to go to different universities, and it's not going to mean the same. The tournament is not going to have the same type of star power. Well, you're going to have the Zion Williams years where maybe they get past the first round, but it doesn't really matter because his goal is to see what he does in the NBA. So when you talk about Baylor, that team is stacked. What can you talk about that that tournament?
Well, Gonzaga was really good. It was a good final, but I think a lot of people were leaning so hard on Gonzaga that they slept on Baylor last year.
But think about how important it is. Like, here locally, we really were attached to U of I versus Loyola, and when the Ramblers made the run a few years back. But beyond that, like, it's all about your bracket and, of course, who's the big matchup in a championship game. But when you get things like Virginia, we know if you watch college basketball, like, okay, Virginia was a good team the year they made it to the finals.
But that came off of the year where they got knocked out in the first round as a number one.
And that's the biggest story. It's not necessarily the tournament, it's little moments. The tournament is the moments themselves. So I think it's fascinating when you say that list. Like, all the other championships have some type of gravitas to them. Atlanta, halfway through the season, making complete roster changes and winning the World Series. And then you have the Buccaneers with Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl, Giannis winning his title, the Sky with Candace Parker. Like, all these teams have stories and there's sports and there's just so much magnitude towards them. And then, unfortunately, look at the Baylor men's basketball team, and college basketball is starting to become that tier when it comes to that level of championships.
Sure, but it didn't help in 2021 that the tournament itself was affected by COVID. Where it was all in Indiana, like based around Indianapolis. I think they did have people in the crowd for the championship, but it was heavily spread out. Of course, it was in the football stadium, the Lucas Oil Stadium. So, I think that could have a factor in it, but I think at the same time, you're talking about the fervor for Alabama football in Alabama, or how big SEC football is, whereas there's not really that dominant conference in college basketball. Baylor's Big 12, but ACC and Big 10 kind of seem to be the big dogs when it comes to the Power 5 conferences in basketball. But I think we're a bad example in the Chicago market of college basketball fans because we haven't had a good DePaul team in years. Illinois was supposed to be the greatest team in a long time, and they get bounced out by the Catholic school in town that really, other than that Final Four appearance a few years ago and the championship back in 1963, there's really not a lot of history.
Northwestern has struggled. UIC has struggled.
Think of how big of a deal it was a few years ago when Northwestern just made the tournament for the first time. So we have kind of a pitiful track record in this state of college basketball within the last 30 years. Now, you talk to someone older than us, and they're talking about the glory days of DePaul in the 70s.
Hey, Marver, I think you were around for the glory days of DePaul, and you're a residential DePaul fan, if I remember correctly.
Right. Well, I am, and I was there, and when they moved out of Alumni Hall after 1980 into the Rosemont Horizon at the time, they had 17,000 people there. For the Mark McGuire, the Terry Cummings. I'll tell you something else. It's like I got to have a college basketball game, in my blood. It's kind of like I got to have the needles going. I've been to 2 full games already this year in 2022. I'm on the back from one right now, and I was at the DePaul debacle yesterday, but they scored 14 points in the first half. So talk about a bad performance. But I just got back from a thrilling Illinois State Valparaiso game, which Valparaiso won in overtime over here in Indiana. So I'm getting my 6. It's okay.
He talks about getting his fix. I was looking at NIU basketball tickets, even though I don't even know if they're never good, but it was it's only like $10 to go to a game. Why not?
It's fun. And look, I think that's something that we all miss, is being able to enjoy any type of these games, being around other fans. But I think, we obviously make jokes because Marver we talk about being on the inside when it comes to DePaul. Paulie over here is also always watching U of I basketball. So, we know locally, especially because of alumni and just out of tradition, there's a lot of fans that love a lot of these universities, whether it's on the football field, whether it's soccer, whether it's basketball. But I think nationally, that's one thing that you're seeing is we'll see what the Super Bowl ratings are this year. There are so many contenders, so many big franchises that imagine if it's Dallas versus a New England in the Super Bowl. Imagine if it's Dallas versus Buffalo in the Super Bowl. There is so much that these type of sports.
What if it ends up being Brady Mahomes again?
And that's going to do even better than last year. It will do better.
I think so, because the game's going to be in LA. There's probably going to be a bigger crowd this year, depending on what we're looking at in February and what California is willing to allow. But I think that was, I think COVID really did take kind of the luster out of a lot of this stuff last year. But I think that Super Bowl too, I think a lot of people rubber stamped the Chiefs as champions before that game was played, and it wasn't even close. It was all Buccaneers, an impressive defensive performance. They had Mahomes on his toes the entire time, just running away from that defense. And you saw the final proof, the official check, of Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time because he was able to win outside of the Bill Belichick system. I think that's significant in itself, but at the same time, you would have expected more exciting of a Super Bowl when you're talking about Brady versus Mahomes.
And I think the Sky winning was a big moment, not just locally. Locally, obviously here in Chicago, we love a winner. It really hit nationally, and it didn't hurt because Candace Parker was on that team. And it just goes to show what not only a superstar, and we're seeing it with the Bulls, what a superstar does, but what happens when that superstar wins in a situation where there were so many good vibes and so many people pulling for them. And I think for somebody like myself personally, I was just intrigued with the way this team came together, the way that the WNBA is kind of built and their playoff format and their scheduling for this team to kind of make the run that they did. I think that's what impressed a lot of people. I also thought they played really fun basketball, which is also a thing of product, right? You could watch a show on any network from HBO all the way down to the CW. As long as it's quality basketball, a quality show, you're going to watch it, you're going to enjoy it. It's the same thing with sports. I think a lot of people used to get turned off because they're like, oh, it's the WNBA. And then you actually watch these series, you watch these teams, you watch this talent, and you're like, they can ball, and they're not just balling, they're winning. Oh, and it's one of the greatest ever that I've seen win Olympic gold medals and NCAA championships. Oh, and she's from this city.
I think now you have, a generation that's grown up with the WNBA, playing in the WNBA. So I think, the quality's gotten better with the, training over the years. But now you have a generation that at least is influenced by it. And women's basketball, I think, is only going to get more exciting from here.
And seeing an entire, Marvelous talked about DePaul at its heyday, seeing DePaul filled with arena full of people. That's what it was at Wintrust. And it wasn't the ball playing. It was the sky filling out that arena. It was the place to be. And this is, obviously we're a bunch of old guys here talking about it, but when the kids, the youths, are on social media hyping up this team, and Sky City, Sky Town, hashtag Sky, Candace Parker, like they were everywhere. They were on Instagram. Portillo's was hacking all their product because Candace Parker loved them. I think it is something that we all enjoyed and something we want to spotlight. But I think something that kind of had a cloud over it, and probably it's something you and I watched every single time we worked a shift here at the station. The Olympics were in 2021, and like who's talking about the Olympics? Like, I know there was moments,
off the top of your head, what do you remember about the Olympics? What's the top story from the Olympics?
Nobody was
there. Now you showed me the wrestling one, and I didn't even know about that.
Gable Stevenson winning the gold medal, coming back
in the last 2 seconds.
Yeah, and like to me, that was one of the big. I guess Team USA, like for here locally. Zach Levine winning a gold medal, kind of coming into his own and starting to build relationships around the NBA. But you're right, like Simone Biles was the story of the Olympics, I think.
That's a good transition because she was named the Time Athlete of the Year, and that was interesting because she did not perform in the Olympics. She withdrew from the competition after getting what I forgot what the twisties is what it was called.
Yes,
it's kind of where you kind of like lose your equilibrium or where you're kind of at.
In golf, they call it the yips.
Well, yeah, pitching. No, but this is kind of different from the yips because it's like, you're performing a physical thing where, you have to twirl and tumble and it's
break
like,
your neck.
It'd be the same as like a diver not being able to land, head first or feet first. Yeah. So, smart on her to realize that it could be detrimental to one, her health, her physical health, and two, the team's well-being, in terms of competition, and the fact that she was the one that made that decision. It's not like something like the Team USA boycott of 1980, where these people are training and then the government decides to make that decision for them. That was her that decided to do that, and she's also had the past success because she's not chasing something now. She knows what it's like to win the all-around and to be a gold medalist. So that was big on her to do that. I thought it was interesting that Time gave it to someone for a lack of performance on the field versus someone that had a great performance on the field, like let's say a Shohei Ohtani, someone that was doing stuff that Babe Ruth hasn't done in years.
Which is my next thing, Paul, because Ohtani was great, but Simone Biles, not only she brought attention to not just the sports in the Olympics, but to the whole mental health case. I mean, there were people praising her and trashing her left and right for this decision.
I think it comes down to it's not apples and apples, but it's almost like the most valuable player or the most valuable player on their team. What Simone Biles did for social commentary for sports in general is a bigger story than what Shohei Ohtani actually did on the field. I mean, I think both are so important. First of all, they're both breaking down barriers that in their own different way. And they're breaking down different stigmas in their own way. I'm proud of Simone Biles. You don't have to like necessarily how anybody handles any situation, but at the end of the day, she cared about her health. And I'm also really excited to see Shohei Ohtani, and I'm glad that a lot of people are able to love a Japanese-born player that plays for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Like, there is something cool about that, but there's also showing that there's room for improvement. Marver, you hear some of this. I mean, do you ever remember there's an Olympics and the fact that Simone Biles was just part of this crazy storm of people judging her not knowing that they've ever been on this little 3x2-inch thing?
Marver?
Marvelous One is out scouting. You can tell that he's getting ready to find the next Bears catch coach.
No. Oh. You were fading out on me. I'm here.
Okay, so the Marvelous One, let me ask you this. Simone Biles and the Olympics happening this year. We're talking about her being the athlete of the year from, was it Time Magazine?
Yeah.
Your opinion, I mean, seeing for the year that was, I mean, how crazy is it that the Olympics even happened? We really didn't have a lot of fervor for it, but Simone Biles being the center of attention and breaking down a lot of different barriers, whether good or bad for people's opinion, being the focal point and not even winning in the event we were all expecting her to win.
Yeah. I mean, I know Candace Parker was named Athlete of the Year in another publication. So, I mean, Simone Biles brought some attention to mental health issues. I mean, much there's been other athletes that have done that in tennis and in other sports. But in terms of athletics, I mean, obviously she's a role model and a terrific athlete. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to perform and show her full skill in this Olympics. And, believe it or not, we have another Olympics in a few weeks, and there'll be no U.S. hockey professionals in it. So there's a lot of stuff going on that's different than what we're used to.
And I think going into just some of that, I think on the back half of this second hour, we'll talk about some of the biggest moments and some of the biggest stories that are going to lead into 2022, because that does play into effect of what we've seen from, the Olympics, how amateurism, right? I think that was the big thing that a lot of people kind of transferred that into college athletes. And to see what Simone Biles has done with mental health, to see what's happened with Antonio Brown, I think that's going to be the story of 2022 is athletes and how we as fans, as we as media, and as the athletes themselves are going to handle some of these situations. Simone Biles was one case. Naomi Osaka was one case. You look at Serena Williams, who's always kind of fought with these things. And now you're starting to see it in a lot of these other sports, in the NBA, the NFL, MLB, where people are going to have to start taking care of their mental health, what it means to them. We saw it with Calvin Ridley, just as top of the food chain when it comes to wide receivers in the NFL, and said, I need to go get right. So I don't know about you guys, 2021, that being a big story, how do you think that lends into 2022?
I mean, it's a valid point here, but what we're leading out is Michael Jordan took a few years away from basketball and baseball just because he was tired, and that's the thing.
Supposedly.
Supposedly.
As the story goes.
But no one's going criticizing Michael Jordan's toughness. No one's criticizing Calvin Ridley's toughness here, and that's the thing, I'm starting to see a lot of these cases here, and I'm starting to wonder, is it mental health, or in the NFL, is this a huge case of CTE really affecting a lot of guys here? And I think maybe we need some, protocols, and as people like to criticize Goodell for keeping players safe, heaven for effing bid. But again, mental health, I've struggled with it my whole life. I'm sure several thousands, hundreds of listeners have at least, and so you gotta take care of yourself here, guys. Like, we're all on radio, we all work ourselves and burn ourselves to the end of that candle, and there's days where we just get back and we just pass out in bed. And I think this is definitely something we need to kind of focus on here and not criticize these people for stepping out. They're speaking out because, hey, they're in the spotlight doing all this stuff here. Simone Biles could have broken her effing neck from a guy who can't even do 3 sit-ups without getting winded,
Well, if we're going to talk about, withdrawing from competitions and mental health, we got to bring up Naomi Osaka.
Yes,
she was kind of before Biles, withdrawing from the French Open, opting not to compete in Wimbledon. And that set off kind of a firestorm of, how dare she, and just kind of the way the public scrutiny that she received from not wanting to do certain interviews, just not feeling comfortable there. So I think, is part of the bigger story of mental health in sports. If we're going to talk about Simone Biles, we got to bring up Naomi Osaka. But, like Devin, you bring up a good point, though, about the NFL with just the CTE. You've been seeing guys over the last few years that are kind of throwing away, maybe that's not the best way to put it, but leaving the game early to sacrifice, I'd rather have, not have lingering injuries and not have any sort of, brain damage going further.
Andrew Luck. Yep. Andrew Luck was they were calling him John Elway. The man was this close. Look at how this Colts team is right now. Mm-hmm. Imagine how they would be with a healthy Andrew Luck compared to a Carson Wentz. Mm-hmm. I mean, and he left in the prime of his career because he was sick of getting brain damage. And we as fans, I think this is it, right? And I put us as fans. I don't think anybody, just because you do radio or you write an article, that doesn't mean you can't be a fan or that you're not on that type of. You could just be smart enough and have common sense to watch what's going on with some of these guys. And to have this notion that you can have some sympathy and empathy for these guys. I think in 2022, all of us need to do a better job of reading details, to being a little bit more conscious about some of the things we say. We talk about sprained ankles and torn MCLs and torn ACLs and back spasms like they're nothing, but we call off work and we have the sniffles. It's like there is still something to kind of understanding and having some form of compassion for these guys. Like, I get it. Antonio Brown comes off as a clown when he does that, but we don't know.
It doesn't help what he did today, though.
But that's an example. It's like 10 years from now, when we find out something is wrong, if something's wrong, we're going to look back at how we handled some of these situations, how we talked about some of these situations. And I hope that we're able to grow a little bit as a fan base on all you can say somebody it plays bad objectively, like that's okay. You can boo somebody like that. The point is Derrick Henry, calling Derrick Henry soft because he has a broken foot. It's like he's playing in the National Football League. He's lucky. He's probably not. Right now, Dalvin Cook up north has 2 broken shoulders, essentially. Mm-hmm. Like these guys, these athletes, these women are all playing with injuries. And I hope when we see something like just with mental health itself that, okay, we can have some form of understanding that Calvin Ridley is a tough guy. He's an athlete. He's a superstar. But just like the rest of us, people go through some stuff.
And all valid points here. One thing I want to bring up is Clay Matthews. He was on Mean Tweets a few years back, and someone's tweeted, Clay Matthews, you're sitting out for a broken thumb. Tear that mother bleeper off and get back in the game. And I'm just sitting here like, just imagine, like, if our boss is like, oh, Mercado, you're bleeding out of your head? No, take that up, bro, and get back in the booth.
Well, right here in town, the way they treated Jay Cutler after he tore his MCL in the NFL chair.
If you can walk, you can play, but they let Derrick Rose sit for, like, years with a bad toe, you know?
But this is what's frustrating about the Jay Cutler thing, and I know we're going to the past, but then you have Maurice Jones-Drew, who was the one that didn't help. So it's somebody within their own community. So it's not until, not only us as fans, us in media, they have to also do it themselves. Mm-hmm. So understand that, and it's something you hear cliche, playing hurts and playing injured. You do play hurt. You do go to work with a headache sometimes. You do go to work if your back was a little messed up because you slept wrong. But if you have a broken back, you don't have to go to work. And it's the same thing in all sports. Like, you can't expect these people to be Superman because these are the most explosive athletes we've seen of all time. Think about how great athletes have just gotten over these years. So when Derrick Rose is tearing his MCL and Ricky Rubio at this point in the NBA, who's no Derrick Rose is tearing his MCL, you have to understand that this is that's the way sports are. So I hope in 2022, I hope that Naomi and Simone Biles and all these other great athletes are a precursor to how we do treat people. Because what have we been saying forever? Mental health is physical health, and we believe that here on the Sports Cubicle. So I think we're really excited to see, hopefully, the world of sports change in a positive way. That doesn't mean you can't be critical. That doesn't mean that you can't judge and be objective when you're scouting and talking about the game and how things were executed. But we're still talking about humans. We've been trying to fire Matt Nagy for 11 weeks now, right? He's still a good guy. And we saw how he addressed the Jeff Dickerson loss. And we've seen him kind of handle this all in stride. So while he may be a bad head coach, he's still a decent dude, and we got to remember that.
And that is a valid thing. That's like, we don't always agree with people, but at the end of the day, these guys are still human. Who is Matt Nagy really hurting physically? Emotionally, all our feelings, but, you know, the guy, he seems like you could share a beer with him maybe, but again, these are real people here, guys. They just make way more money than us, and if that's the case, there's a lot more people we could be mad at that are doing a lot worse, a lot more money.
Who is your athlete of the year? Let us know. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. If you missed any one of our past episodes, any one of our past interviews, we're on the archives over at WCPT's SoundCloud and wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves Network. And you can check out the video version of the podcast over at youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network and at the Rewind Sports 60. It's been a fast-paced shows, boys. Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, Dan Marver, myself, Mike Mercado. We want to hear from you. Who was your athlete of 2021? Who was your team of 2021? Where can the fine folks find us, Dev?
You can find us at WCPT 820's Facebook. You can find us on the Rewind Sports 60 Roku, Amazon, iOS, Google Play Store, Satellite in the Sky, Blimp. I think, Paul's got some, Rewind Sports 60 boxer briefs on, you're telling me about?
He showed this to us.
Okay, yeah. But keep those off the camera here, though.
And where can people call us?
773-763-9278. And please, that's actually, I like your question, Mercado. Who was your athlete of the year? Who would you guys say? Let's go around. I'm curious.
So I am going to see my athlete of the year in 2021 was probably Giannis Antetokounmpo after winning the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I was kind of leaning that direction, too. I think Giannis. But I do like Shohei. I thought it was really interesting that Time chose Simone Biles. But yeah, gun to my head, I'd say Giannis Antetokounmpo. That was impressive considering that it's been LeBron's league for so long and that he was able to overcome that despite so many opportunities of getting close with the Bucks. And no one in their right mind would have ever expected the Milwaukee Bucks to win a championship in the LeBron James era.
Marver, who would you say was your athlete of the year?
Oh, you can't go wrong with the Greek Freak. I pick him too, and it's just the other guy that's amazing is Brady. I mean, He seems like he's the athlete of every year for the last 20 years.
That's a good call.
I'm going to stick with a fan favorite here. My athlete of the year was Tim Anderson. I'm going to be local here. Look at a guy for the White Sox who had one hell of a season here.
Let us know all over the universe. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. It's been a fast hour and a half already, boys. We have one last half of the show, and the Paulacious one has brought up a bunch of good stuff so that we close out us covering for the family meeting. You're on the Sports Cubicle. It's Devin Tingle. It's Dan Marver. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado.
To be fair, Tim Anderson wanted to play basketball when the Bulls had COVID problems.
Stand by. Stick around.
It's official. The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath is on WCPT 820.